It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
Welcome to the Lekker Rugby Pod. I know lots of people have been waiting for this one after this weekend's upsets. Let's call it that. Let's be kind and considerate, and here to talk to us about it. Not just the Leinster upset, but what it means for rugby in general. Welcome back, Harry.
How's it, MVA? Yeah, it's a tectonic shift for people in Dublin. It's catastrophic. My friend Bernard Jackman, how he put it to me this morning was the most underachieving pro team in rugby history. I think that's what he said, something along those lines. So that's coming from a deeply blue Leinsterman himself, and that's not the most of it. When I read Irish press and looked at Irish social media over the weekend, it was a circular firing squad. People are really upset. They're demoralized. That's the best word. And there's this thing in sport where you get close and then you keep getting close and then get close again and you never get over the line. And there's a thing that starts to take hold of you. It's a bit like the Lions getting to the finals of Super Rugby so many years in a row. And you just wonder, what is the missing ingredient? And unlike the Lions, who were doing it with scrappy, Ross, Crab, Cronje kind of players, Leinster has 900 test caps. One of the best backs in world rugby shipped in, and one of the largest, most skilled tight forwards in history shipped in, and the world's best defensive coach on hire and had his system bedded in for 2 years. So what happened? And I know you and I want to talk about all the different threads from that. Like, what can we draw? And what is sort of too much of a one-off, recentism, overreaction? And what is something that we could actually say, no, that is a trend and it's something to look out for?
Well, the first thing that stood out for me is 3 of the 4 games this past weekend were high-scoring games. I mean, there were tries aplenty, lots of to and throwing and everything else, compared to dour knockout slugfests in the past. Any knockout match, you can just think about the World Cup final for that matter. It's never been exciting. It's always kind of a who's left standing at the end of the day. This is a complete opposite. In that sense, we're asking the question, has rugby changed? Has the shape of rugby changed? What's happening here?
So rugby, when I say rugby right now, I'm saying the powers that be. Rugby wants rugby to change. It's never clear in rugby whether our powers and authorities are smart and effective enough to execute what they think they want. But let's just say that we know for sure that's what they want is more scoring. They've done, some sort of self-serving surveys. They've talked to the people who don't like us, don't like our sport enough, where they said, we'd like you if you had more scoring. And they've decided in their wisdom or their folly that we need to be more like that, where it needs to be more like basketball, where there's a lot of scoring, and then it comes down to the end, and everyone's got a chance to score, and it's not so easy to be a defensive juggernaut and stop you from scoring. It's going to have to be whoever can go in the last run, whoever's got the final momentum, and so they like that. They think that's, the template based on the quarterfinal, France versus South Africa, high scoring, yet incredibly physical, high skill, not the 11-9, 12-8 type score that has tended to happen in knockout matches now for 30 years. And this is true, by the way. If you took all the numbers of all the leagues and then compared the normal score lines of the regular competition season, and then you compare them to knockouts, and even within the knockouts, you go from quarterfinals to semifinals to finals, tries dry up, line breaks disappear, chances to score evaporate, time spent in 22 shrink, all of it goes down. And it's done that way for 30 years. So rugby's like, we don't want that to be the case in our biggest shop window of the sport, in 2027 or 2031, when you have the biggest viewing public tune in, and there's people that don't know about rugby. What we don't want to have is only the purists are cheering because it's 12-9. They want there to be a more give and take. So let's just say one thing, which is congratulations, World Rugby, on changing the sport all the time, over and over and over, in the name of getting more attack, ball and play, less static time. If I'm just congratulating you on, if that's what you wanted, at least you showed me you can make it happen. You know, you can make the refs hurry lineouts. You can make the refs speed everything up enough where this is what's happening. Now, we can argue now about whether that's a good thing or not. So that's a different issue. Is that really the way to go, or do sports prosper the most when they stay who they are? They get through, doldrums and tough times. They know when they're doing well, and they know that a game between Ireland and South Africa in the pool that was 13-8 is just as thrilling, or a 12-11 game is just as thrilling as the ones that are 34-32. But here where we are is that in 2025, we can honestly say that it's not just a one-off, that games where people can hold a team, high skill team, to 1 or 2 tries are getting more and more rare. So, and Leinster's been involved in all these, by the way. So Leinster's a great template to look at because it's so well stocked. It's got so much cohesion. If a team like Leinster, built now on defense and able to shut down, one of the only teams able to shut someone down, gets done 4 tries in the first half by Northampton Saints, then what does that mean? If the best defensive scheme, the one that's the hardest to pierce, you can pierce it. And we can talk a little bit about how the Saints did that. But part of that is that there's more times, more opportunities, more balls in play, it's difficult to run the clock out. So Leinster was built on this idea: we get ahead, we post a score, we get to oranges ahead by a few, and then we just keep grinding you. And then when we're 10 up, 13 up, we shut you down and you don't score in the second half. So this time, the Saints did score in the second half 1 time, but they had done the damage in the beginning. And that's just literally unheard of. There's a part of me that thinks, hey, Harry, don't get too far out ahead of yourself. Maybe it's just as simple as this, that Leinster was completely underdone. They had one of the most one-sided seasons in history where they swept everyone aside. Even in champions-type knockouts, they were knocking people out, with 50, 60-0. They rested players. They took some time off. They lost one on the Irk kind of because of that. And then they roll into this. They've been featuring, selling tickets to Cardiff for the final. They were the only one of the 8 teams that said that. They were looking ahead too much. Maybe it's just underdone. They get shocked in the first half. They do draw it back. They win the second half. So maybe it's just a really, really bad 30 minutes. That can happen to someone. They get blitzed. They get blitzed for 30 minutes. Instead of the blitz defense, they got blitzed attacked. And what Saints did is they split the defense of Leinster with the first team to find channels. And Brett Igo, I think, is the analyst that you should go to and watch. He's got these pinned on his social media, where he shows you exactly how Northampton avoided the smash zone. So Jacques Nienaber defense depends on giving you fool's gold outside, funneling you into the middle with blitz, barge, and big hits. And the smash zone is where, you sign your name on your opposite guy. And the Saints never, in that first 30 minutes, they never let that happen. And if they were about to get sucked into the smash zone, they went out the back and they regrouped. And they tried to find a way to split that defense and got into the trams. It turned out that, like is often the case, kicking was the way to do it. So this game, if World Rugby wanted to reduce the number of kicks, that's not really it. You're kicking a lot is going to be part of the recipe. The second thing that the Saints showed, and it was the same thing that happened in Bordeaux, it was the same thing that happened in up in Edinburgh, is the team that was confident without playing with the ball. So now we're back to the same old maybe. Even though the scores are higher and the tries are higher and more people are scoring more tries, it's still the team that doesn't play with the most ball that wins. It's the counterattack team that wins. So these coaches are no dummies. They've looked at the changes and they said, it's even harder now to resource 145 rucks. How do we get our guys to those rucks? How do I do the 5th ruck? I got to get Thomas the Toy all the way over there, 14 meters away, when he just clean one on ruck 2. So it's better actually to be the team that builds the fewest rucks. Look at the Saints, 60 or so rucks. Leinster, their typical 120 plus. Look at the pass rate. How many times did they put the ball in the air from hands to hands, which brings up fumbles, knock-ons, misdirections, offloads attempts by Archia, that go to no one and kill an attack. So the ornateness of the attack and all that extra time that World Rugby has now created, it to me looks more like the ruck builders do really well in the league and they do really well in the regular season and they can swamp you with attempts and they're playing against teams that are not as good. But when come time for the knockout, it's still the ruck destroyers who can then lekker back around and get to space like Tommy Freeman did. That those guys are going to be the winners still in knockouts. So the script is flipped in the sense that there's going to be more tries on offer and difficult to find a 1 to 2 try game. But the script remains the same. The tale remains the same in some senses, in that good kicking, aerial contest, 50-50 balls, and seizing your moments, scoring, 5 or 6 points for every 22 entry was the Saints. And then Leinster was 2. So it was just a matter of how many times, you get in and then how efficient you are. And the most efficient team, the Saints, Bordeaux, who had less of the ball than Toulouse, that ended up making a lot more tackles. They could soak up the pressure, and then a ball would spill, and then Louis Bielbiere was off to the races. And so perhaps World Rugby is getting what they wanted, which is at least it's more entertaining for the neutral observer or the casual observer. But maybe rugby is still the winner in the sense that the smarter rugby team wins. And but we still have to think about Leinster as a whole now and think about, what does that mean for Nienaber? What does that mean for Leo Cullen? I mean, how can you keep getting to the precipice? You're trying to go up Everest and you get to that one rock where you can see the peak and then, no, sorry, the weather's bad, come down. And you just keep doing that over and over and over. And what lessons does that have for the All Blacks right now, or Ireland national team, or maybe at home, the Bulls? There's different ways you can look at this. And you can also wonder, why did they lose?
Yeah, let's talk about the coaches then. Again, I've drawn the analogy to Jake White. I've always defended him in the sense that he's made several finals. He's always, right up there in the log, and also came up short a little bit. He's won several competitions in the past, though. But why is he different to Leo Cullen now? Leo Cullen has, how many times have they got close, got everything in place? And like this year, I think everything was set up perfectly, like you mentioned before. They were cruising along in the league. They could rest players. They had no injuries to speak of. They've got all the money in the world. They brought in these superstars. Everything, all the stars were aligned. And then something happened. There was an eclipse or something strange happened. What's the difference between Leo Cullen and Jake White, for example? And why would Leo Cullen have to fall on his sword, do you think, and Jake White wouldn't have to?
Well, the most immediate answer to your question is, what the difference between Leo and Jake is about 16 million euros. So say what you will about Jake, he's still having to fight with one hand tied behind his back, whereas Leo had all 4 limbs and a couple of gorillas on his side. So he's being judged extremely fairly because he's had a lot of time. Over the years, he's been given exactly what he said he wanted. So he's been telling his general managers and his board and his recruits what he wants, and he keeps getting exactly what he wants. I mean, you couldn't have more hand designed Slimani, Sneeman, and Geordie with a Nienaber defense. It was supposed to get over the La Rochelle disappointments and the power ball being knocked over by the Bulls, or to the French teams that are built on power. So he got that. He got one of the world's biggest backs, one of the biggest boots, the 4 with the biggest hands and the biggest wingspan. They went big. and then they got big boy defense, and people loved the defense, and they were nilling people in an age where I just said, like, it's unparalleled how much scoring is going on, and yet he was outperforming. But this is the cruelty of sport. If Leinster had rolled in and done what they've been doing all season and didn't have a bad day at the office, and they handled the Saints, beat them 32-10, what we'd be saying today would be markedly different. Is it a new era? Is it a dynasty? Can anyone touch them? They're going for the double. But that's fair if it had been the other way. So it's fair if it's this way, which is, now that you lost, I can also draw a parallel, Leo, is you always do this. This is always happening. So, that's how top sport turns, on little knife edges. And for the All Blacks, it'd be the same, right? If Jordy knocks over the penalty in the Stade de France, all of our narratives right now are different about, well, actually, that 2019 Bok team was more of a one-off. It was a bit lucky here and there, but then they couldn't defend their title. So it does come down to big matches, to your point. Okay, so what do we do with big matches when you fail? Where does the blame lie? Does this vindicate the people who said the Nienaber defense wasn't that good? Does it mean that the Nienaber defense has been worked out by at least one team now? And then people can copy that. To what extent is the Nienaber defense different and distinct from the Jerry Flannery defense with the Felix undercurrent and the stick, ball skills and ruck? How they diverged? Or is it just the same thing? It's the Nienaber defense caretook by some people, and then he come back in and go, no, you're missing a few of the things. I kept it to myself, or is this an example of a season that went too well, and then you weren't ready to get punched in the mouth, and the Saints just decided, we're going to come out swinging because we're the underdogs, and we have no pressure on us, and no one's going to blame us for going to Dublin and losing. And so they decided, but what if we win? And you had just enough young guys that have no conscience. They have no guilt factors. They have no scar tissue. Henry Pollock doesn't have any scar tissue. He doesn't care. He's not thinking. He's a bit like Kane and Moody going and beating the All Blacks. Like, what are we supposed to lose? I mean, there's a whole generation of Buck players who are now 4-0 or 5-1, and they're like, yeah, okay, All Blacks. Who cares? So the Saints had that swagger, but I don't want to really move beyond, first of all, besides that kind of what it takes to knock off a champion, is I don't know if Leinster believed their own hype. That's what I wonder about. I wonder that if they're almost too observant, obedient, there's not enough Henry Pollocks. I mean, the only Pollock type is James Lowe, who, comes out of his shoes celebrating when he does an exit kick, but it seems a bit like, Bongi talking about plastic energy. And did they believe, were they bloodthirsty enough? They had really pretty moves off the tap and go, but it just seemed like the Saints were readier to go at minute 1. And then 30 minutes into the contest and getting to off at 25-15, it just felt like something was missing in the coaching side. So that's where I want to go. What I want to go is that coaching has never been and will never only be about structure, plans, little drawings on paper. All the teams have those. Go into any top club and go to the back room where all the balls are stored and the cones and stuff. You'll see these big whiteboards and there'll be all these pretty arrows and it's fine. That's great, But also rugby and any collision sport, whether it be UFC or rugby or gridiron or anything like that, there's a gladiatorial aspect that Johan van Gaans talked about. I know I've heard the same thing from David Wessels. It's a different kind of level of sending your guys out into the arena. And Leinster failed. Leinster coaches failed. Okay, so we can go later to the players and whether they didn't do their job. One of the only things you can do, your key controllable as a coaching staff, is to choreograph, orchestrate, calibrate, taper, and then peak your team's collective psyche. You've got individuals that get, juiced up in different ways. So maybe you go to Dan Sheehan and you talk this way, and then you go to James Lowe and you calm him down. Maybe you're getting, Josh van der Fleer riled up, and you're getting Ringrose to say, play within yourself. And then you have this collective, and it has to build and peak. There's no doubt in my mind that Leinster took the field on their home patch a little bit like the Bulls did a year ago against Glasgow, where they were either too built up and then sort of flatlined, or they were too lackadaisical and overconfident. I don't know which is which, because I'm not inside those camps. And even if I were, I'd have to be, a psychologist or something to know. But we can say this for sure, is that to win trophies, you get that part right. We were talking to Andre Pretorius over the weekend, and he was quoting Sir Alec Ferguson. I mean, there are coaches who know how to match the message to the moment over and over and over, and they get over the hump, and they do it with different teams, and they do it in different moments. And there are other coaches that are really good, what I'll call custodian or caretaker coaches, that keep your team in the mix, that always have a good season. They know how to keep the board happy, and they know how to keep the players generally happy, but they don't get to the precipice. They don't get to the summit. They don't look down at the world all conquering, because there's only about 4 or 5 of those coaches in the test arena, and there's only about 2 or 3 in every league. And so the whole fraternity is less than 50, and of those 50, there's about 5 that are the cut above, and that can actually put their hands on the trophy, fill it full of beer, and then pour it all over you and have a proper jolt. So we know one of those guys is called Rassi. We know Jake's done it before, and then you have the question of sometimes you've done it, but can you still do it? Leo is going to go down in history, perhaps unfairly and maybe cruelly, as the Leinster lion that didn't roar. And he's got to show that. He's got to bare his teeth or bow out, or clear the stage. So I have it from reliable sources 3, not 2, but 3. And one of our friends also confirmed this over the weekend, that coming into this fixture, for some reason, Leo took over and diminished the impact of Jacques. Not just Jacques, the others. He micromanaged. Maybe it was so apparent to Leo that how big a thing this was. Not so much that he wasn't favored, they were favored, but that what if you lost? I think he knew in his heart of hearts what a big change in the narrative that would be, and how unbelievably bad that would be for both Leo and for Leinster. That he overcompensated and did what leaders shouldn't do, is he took too much on. Running practice, running the drills, on. And so then when the coach is really big, every player is more small. You want your players to play smaller, make your coach huge. Now, it seems like I'm arguing with myself, because you got to have that big charisma. You do, but not on the big moments always. Remember that moment in Chasing the Sun 2 where we see Pieter Steph du Toit take over the locker room? He takes the change room over in a quiet moment, and he invites everyone to be real. If you're scared, let's talk about that as players. Let's be together. There's a challenge in that. There's irony in that of you're really scared. There's always that angle, but also maybe you are. And that is something from player to player you can handle. And what Rassi said in the aftermath of this, that I didn't need to talk. It was one of those moments where I leave the room or I shush because it's not the time. And so 6 months ago, Leo, roar all you want. In the week leading up, that's your time to trust all your different aspects, your scrum coach, your kicking coach, your defense coach. Let them coach up their guys, because those are individual units. Let each regiment of an army compete with each other to be the one that takes the hill, inter-service rivalry. But sometimes when the head man comes in there and is too much on it, it almost makes people more nervous. Sam looked nervous as hell. I mean, more nervous than I've ever seen him. So it's not like he's this kid. Sorry, guys, but he's not. He's a grown man. But he looked like a kid again. He made it seem like the thing looked nervy. And everything depended on precision. The times Leinster scored, it was so precisional. It was, the most perfect, sweet, almost scrum off pass from Josh, across 2 channels to Doris to score. That's hard work when you've got to be that good to win. The Saints were not at all. They were freewheeling, fireballing, super joling, chew gum chewing, pulse taking, kick the chair, and let's run again. And they didn't seem like they cared at all. They had huge nuts and no nerves. And unless that's just organic, and Finn Smith and Dingwall and Freeman and Pollock, and they all just have that innate. I'm going to say that there's some coaching involved there. There's some masterful get you up for this game. Franco Smith in the final a year ago, get you ready. I don't know if it's a dynasty. I don't know if the Saints can do that. So all props to Leo and Leinster for building a long campaign here. But if you're a fan, you kind of would take 3 bad seasons and 2 trophies over 5 pretty good seasons, I think. I think that's the dream. And so, no, I cannot compare Jake to Leo, because Jake is a World Cup winning coach who has to fight with inferior resources, is doing quite well, and is poised. I think it was quite clear that he's not going to go for 2 trophies this year. The Bulls never had that in their arsenal, right? If they did it, it was kind of like by luck, and it would have been a crazy, cool thing to happen. The Urk is their remit. That's their brief. So he's still poised. And there's chinks in the armor of Leinster, and the Saints have showed the whole world on what to do against a blitz rush defense. It's hard to do it because you got to keep doing it for 80 minutes, right? They only won by 3. And at the end, they were hanging on by a thread, and it took a long French conversation about the merits and demerits of a ball rolling out of a ruck and a guy playing a ball off his feet and it coming to rest against the corner flag. That's how close it was to Leinster riding into the final, the heavy favorites to complete the double. All I'm saying is that Jake can say to himself, I'm poised to take down Leinster. And maybe someone else will, but the Bulls are poised to do it, to actually do the thing. And if the Bulls or the Sharks or the Stormers do that, it will just be one of the worst possible seasons for Leinster in a million years. It would be decimating, demoralizing, discouraging. The whole thing would turn into an inquest. There'd be the Grand Inquisition about what went wrong. And for any of those teams I just mentioned, it would be unbelievable. It would be, for the Stormers, it would cap, one of the most goof troopy years ever, where we never really hit our stride. For the Sharks, it would be kind of a underwhelming win by 1, scrape through, and then suddenly show your quality at the end, which is kind of cool. A little bit like how Munster did it a couple of years ago. And then for the Bulls, it would be vindication for Jake. And he would say, but that was my plan all along. This is how I built my season. He would say that. And then you would say, wow, like that is the mark of a good coach. But it's all to play for still. Leinster still has a say in this. You're probably going to get the most disgruntled, hair on fire, revenge. Maybe players take over at some point, and then they just whip everyone in the Irk. But it is one of the most entertaining, surprising, thrilling matches below test level where the Stormers weren't involved that I've ever seen. So those 2 caveats. It was coming out of your seat time. It was when Freeman kept scoring, you just you start laughing because you're like, how is this guy? He's forgotten how not to score. He doesn't know how not to score anymore. Like he's like that guy. Who was it? Not the horrible commentator Ben Smith, the player Ben Smith. He would just find ways to score. He was always in the right place, right time. And then later on in his career, when you stop saying he was a lucky player, you realize there's a lot of skill in being lucky. So Tommy Freeman holds his width really well on the wing. He helps Finn Smith set him free. He's the kind of winger you love as an inside back because you know that he'll make you look good because he kind of reads you, and always seems to put on the jet speed at the right time. He's big too, so it's hard to put him down. And then we have the joy of seeing, let's just say, like I think Johan talks about this, about how much he's going to hate Henry Pollock. I think someone else from Joburg was posting this week, this boy is a big problem because he's got that unique combination, sort of Bobby Skinsat speed, Pierce Spies, sort of repeat loads, that kind of stamina, but strong, looks strong, like a sneaky strong, like Josh van der Fleer. That was a great matchup between Josh and Henry. Actually, that was one to watch. And so all these things came together for a proper rugby match. I think I would have been just as entertained if it was 2-2 and it was harder to score. But there was something to World Rugby's push here for the number of tries, because I could totally see that game through the eyes of someone who'd never played or watched rugby before, and they would have found it more entertaining because the number of times you had these easy on the eye line breaks, it was quite amazing. The shape of the game, though, was my biggest takeaway from this game, which is you carry the ball almost twice as much and you make definitely 2 times as many passes, but you only generate the same number of line breaks. I mean, what you're trying for is line breaks. You're trying for is busted tackles. The Saints developed more busted tackles and the same number of line breaks from about 60% of the energy. So if you were doing this as a physicist or an engineer, you would definitely take the Saints way. You would say, I would prefer to score with much less effort, and I would develop my breaks without having to go through as many tackles. And so that's, to me, that's the shape takeaway is still that you'd prefer South African way, the Bok way, the counterattack, than you would this incredible ruck building energy that the Irish and New Zealand seem to want to extol. I preach the virtues of the other, of still using, to go from defense to attack in a split second, to spot your chances, that when you do get any kind of seam, move the ball really quickly to the quickest guy you've got on the field. And if you have to do it by a grubber, like Jesse Creel did in the quarterfinal against France, for Cheslin Kolbe to get by Damien Penaud, then do it that way. But you're just trying to find mismatches. Northampton Saints went into this match with 5 guys that were better than their Leinster opposite. Leinster had 18 that were better. But the 5 guys on the Saints that were better, you saw them all the time. They've created mismatches. And on the ones that were 50-50 maybe, Alex Mitchell outplayed Jamison Gibson-Park. Finn Smith outplayed Sam Prendergast. But you had these other guys out there that they created a system where Tommy Freeman had enough chances. So the same thing for Cheslin Kolbe. Cheslin Kolbe's always better than his opposite. Always. There's no doubt about it. Peter Stifter-Toy, always better than whoever he's playing against. So find ways you can create those mismatches and you still can win without the ball.
You mentioned the URC there. Now, Leinster can react in one of 2 ways. And we saw what happened to Glasgow after that absolute drubbing they took against Leinster. The week before Leinster, they beat Leicester Tigers with a 0 score. And they were riding high, but they were kind of expecting apparently to lose to Leinster. The guys were sort of deflated. And then after Leinster, it's taken them a while to recover. They've lost now against the Bulls. I suppose they'll be coming back because there are lots of injuries coming back. How do you think Leinster will react now? Because I'm talking specifically about Glasgow Warriors' game against Leinster, that last league game, which will determine whether Leinster can end second, Glasgow will end second, or the Bulls will end second. That's quite an important game. So how do you think Leinster will react to this loss? And what do you think, while we're on the subject of Jacques playing more of a prominent role, maybe Leo stepping back a little bit or being moved aside? What do you think is going to happen there?
Hmm. Well, you've asked a lot of speculative questions there.
Like
So
speciality.
I'm first going to label these as speculations because I don't know. And they're very good questions because they're I don't know questions. So I'll answer your last question by going back in time. I actually think Leo would have been better served in this season by giving the reins more to Jacques to begin with. So to me, the hero of the tale was Jacques. It was the change in the defensive numbers. And then I think Jacques got a unique ability to rile you up for a big occasion. And it turns out the Saints game was the big occasion. Maybe Leo secretly thought that too, but the whole system was set up for the final being the big one. And so they overlooked the semi, maybe. I don't think Jacques would have done that. He's very methodical. He's kind of OCD. So he would have just ticked all the boxes and made sure everything was right. So then what do you learn from it now that you didn't do that? Sort of you keep digging a hole, or do you get out of the hole? I think I'd still, if I was Leo, learn the right lesson, but it's super hard to learn the right. Everyone says you learn a lot from losing. I mean, you learn, but sometimes you learn the wrong lesson. So, you reflexively dig in, or you become stubborn, or you don't want it to be true. So you keep saying, no, it couldn't have been my problem. Couldn't have been me. So I will coach even more. I'm going to coach you up even more. And you've seen the overcoach at juniors levels on touchline. They're overcoaching everything. Like everything they're saying is correct. They're just screaming at the 14-year-old boy to do this and that. You know what the effect is to the 14-year-old boy? He doesn't want to play with free abandon anymore. He's not wildly liberated to take the game over. He keeps looking over at the coach, and everything he does, he makes a mistake. He thinks he's going to get yanked and pulled and screamed at. So there is a danger that Leinster will now overanalyze every little thing in the world and then keep stumbling into the same trap. Or they'll do what a lot of coaches do, which is decide that there was one reason why we lost, one or two, and fixate on those two things in practice and in messaging. And everyone's obsessed with those two things. We offloaded too much. That's it. We offloaded too much. We tried 15 offloads. That's far too many. Should have been 5. Archia, you're our scapegoat. 3 out of 10. Terrible game. You are no longer permitted to offload. I want you to drive in there and set the next ruck. And our second thing is on defense, Sam, you missed too many tackles, So, you blame individuals. In my mind, if you miss 37 tackles as a team total and your fly-off missed 5, I'm not really yelling at the fly-off that much, especially since the two most, blockbuster misses were post-line break. I mean, he's just running in space. You might as well have been Willie LaRue at the end, trying to keep an All Black out. You're not going to blame Willie for a line break where he doesn't make a great tackle on Caleb Clark. The problem started before that. And if there's 32 missed tackles by my good tacklers, because number 10 is always the worst tackler on every team. So if you fell off 3, loose forward. If Kalen Doris missed 3 and Max Deegan missed 3 and Gary Ringrose missed 3, I'm much more concerned about that. I'm a lot more concerned about everyone missing 3 tackles than my worst tackler missing 5. Because I'm assuming that if you find Sam on the field, a proper team will make him miss 3, 4, 5 times. That's just the way it is. He's not a good tackler. So I think that's the danger of it. And then saying to Archia, well, we offloaded too much. So now we have to go into the next matches and we want to clip your wings. Do you really want Archia on the field if he feels like he cannot offload when he's the top offloader in the league of the year? I mean, sometimes offloads work. And when they do, you score. When they don't, in a match where it was 5-5 tries, then it's easy to blame someone. But you're trying to score tries. And the lineout wasn't really working very well. And so when lineouts don't work very well, I know you don't blame one guy. I know you blame a whole system. And I would think also on the defensive read, the danger of the Nienaber defense is they overplay. So you got to stay at home on defense sometimes. And then when you've built an entire system on not staying at home and going on a joel, a blitz, a shooter, you're my shooter, go kill something, hit everything you see. And then there's a situation where you can be manipulated to overplaying. And so everything someone does, you feel like it's up to you to tattoo yourself on it. Northampton really used that. So every time there was a shift in the Nienaber defense, the Saints had something worked out already where they could get around it, behind it, or retreat. And they just refused to be in the smash zone. So this is a lesson for all the teams that are wondering about the box too. And so the question remains, to what extent has Springbok defense changed and evolved since Nienaber left is the first question. Has Nienaber evolved as well, but has he also maybe gone in a different direction? But is there any way around it that the main concept of Jacques' defense is immediacy? Like it is making the defense be the protagonist and not the respondent. I think Jacques' main point is shrink the time on the second pass. Don't even get there if you can. Man and ball, big hits, and every rock is a war zone. And so that's a highly aggressive defense. And, for everything that's highly aggressive, there is a danger of overplaying. So I think that's one of the big takeaways. Obviously, Jerry Flannery would have been watching this match with great interest, right? As a Munsterman, he would have really enjoyed watching this and diagramming it. So I think, one thing is on your second line defense, which is where the Boks are without parallel the best. So you think you have a line break, but then you get caught by Jesse Creel, by Kurtley Arnsa. Even a guy like Pollard comes hard back. All the flyouts have to. Damon Delende starts sprinting when his man to the outside shoots. He just starts sprinting to the touchline. So the commitment, I didn't see in Leinster when I watched it back, some of the tries. I saw people jogging. I didn't see that maniacal hair on fire commitment that I had become associated with. So that's why I also pointed to this idea of peaking, maybe overtraining. Maybe Leo on the practice field went too far. Maybe it was time to take a day off and go watch something from a different sport that's also highly aggressive. Feed your soul. I don't know. Get riled up. Maybe there wasn't enough material on the poster board where you said, look what they said over there in Northampton. I don't know, but you have to find an enemy. And it just looked like they were a little bit too friendly and glad to be there on their home patch, certain to win. Even on the comeback, it felt like not taking the three was a.
That was my next question. Why didn't they take the three?
A little bit cocky, yeah. So you can't blame Argus Nienaber and Jacques Nienaber for that. You're not going to blame Sam for it. I'm sure Sam has to follow orders. So somebody said, we have momentum. Can we just say right now, stop with the momentum thing, guys. Think about it. There is no real true momentum in a scientific sense on the rugby pitch. There's a thing you have to do, which is kick to the corner, complete a line out with a good call, a good lift, avoid the sack, get the ripper to come take the ball. And then if the first stop doesn't go right and the ref tells you that, you've got to complete that. It's a lot of steps of execution. Do you really think that because you've had a success for about 3 or 4 minutes that you have momentum in that particular exercise? No, you don't. Vegas is built on this idea that you think you have momentum. No, you're still rolling the dice. And it's a harder thing. The tap and go. Okay, sure. You could say you had 4 of the 5 tries were scored from tap and goes. So you had 4 tap and goes that were brilliant. So let's keep going. I mean, don't you realize there's also this thing of pushing your luck? At some point, the averages kick in. Who's ever done 7 tap and goes in a game and it worked out? Nobody. So you already had the record. You had 4. So put the ball on the tee and draw the game, and then see what happens in the final 35 seconds. You're at home. You're going to play at 10-10. It's not even sudden death. You always take the home team on extra time in any sport. Just get in there, and then take it, steal it. Do what Toulouse did to you a year ago in the final, which is 15-all. Toulouse was happy to get to the draw, no try scored, and then win in extra time. So I just felt like that was overconfident. And I know people are going to say, well, it was a tough kick, but there was a penalty before that was right in the middle. Or not in the middle, but it was 95% kick. You take the kick, and then you have all this time left in which you could be lucky again, or you could just get to the house, get to extra time, build your 20-minute plan, and win. So I think these are all pieces of evidence of coaching, oversight, overconfidence, being a little bit too over or under on the psych. I don't know what that was. I cannot speak to that. It's speculation. But as far as the response, that's a double speculation. What you have to understand first is, why do they think they lost? Will they avoid the tendency to then pick on 1 or 2 people or 1 or 2 things, hyperfixate on that, thereby setting themselves for failure again against smart coaches like Franco and Jake, who can go, oh, okay, you zig, then I'll zag, and we just keep going. The more damaging thing, to be honest with you, is the psychology. It's my question mark about Glasgow right now is, have you lost that sort of belief in yourself that precedes all things? It's not momentum, but it's better than momentum. The faith in your own abilities to perform under pressure, proven, tested, demonstrable to yourself and all, that when it comes down to it, and you've got me down in some kind of hold, I will get up and I will beat you. And did you think you could come in here and beat me in my own house? Never. That, whatever that is, that's Crusaders, that's Rossi right now. You just go, oh, you'll find a way. You'll find a way against England. He finds a way. By the way, Arceus Neyman was part of that. So let's not say that these players became bad overnight. I look more to the coaching staff. Are they reading the room right? Are they reading the tactics right? Are they finding the game plan? And can they make you play a little bit worse than you should on your day? And then can I make my guys play a little bit better? And these things are fine margins. We keep saying there's fine margins, and then you point out one fine marginal thing that swings it, and you go, oh, it couldn't be that. That's too fine. No, that's what it is. It just doesn't take that much for really good players like Alex Mitchell, Finn Smith, Tommy Freeman to find a hole in your defense. And once they find the hole, they'll just keep doing the same thing until you plug the hole. So then you go to oranges, Jacques plugs it, you score only 1 more try post. But it's too late. Now you're chasing the game, and Leinster is not built to chase games. The entire system of Jacques Nienaber coming in to help Leo was get a lead, put it to bed, and then, just sail. And they had not been in this particular situation in 2025. And it was new to them. Even though the players are experienced and they're Irish internationals, plus a Kiwi and a Safa, they didn't have the stones to pull themselves out of it. And in the end, when it came time for crunch time and you had to have a clear mind, I suppose it was Leo. We have to say it was Leo until someone tells it wasn't. Leo said, don't go for the 3. Push it into another tap and go one more time, and roll the dice, and you came up a loser.
How much of what happened in that game was due to the fact that they played an opponent that they're not used to? They play the Bulls, they play Glasgow, they play all the usual suspects. And in a game like this, remember, Saints are the defending champions in the Premiership. I mean, they're not doing that well this year, but still came to Loftus and beat the Bulls here. How much do you think that loss might have been due to the fact that they didn't know the enemy and sort of underestimated them as a result?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think they So correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think they did play the Saints in their drive last year, and the Saints played them really well.
Yeah,
I think that's
they
right.
did. They almost made it.
Yeah, so the Saints are a difficult team for them. And that makes me think of matchup styles. So I think there's certain teams that pose problems for a team that's supposedly a lot better, but they don't. It's hard to show. I mean, you know that in boxing all the time. You have knockout power, and then it's deflated by someone who's a proper boxer. But if you have two knockout artists and one's bigger, stronger, quicker, you know who's going to win. But you don't when it's a boxer, because a boxer makes you do things you don't want to do, and he keeps moving you around, and he slips blows, and he can clinch well. So I feel like the Saints is an awkward opponent for Leinster, is the first point. Second point, I think you're right that part of the long season of the Irk can kind of make you go down that road, and then you have another Irk opponent in the Champions Cup. So you kind of like, I think maybe there was a bit of a foreignness to it. But I also think the Saints played differently than the Saints. I think the Saints are a clever side, and they threw in a few wrinkles. I think the attack of the Saints is worth studying for all coaches, how they manipulated in phases 3, 4, 5, the types of kicks they put through, sort of the idea of, we're going to do some things that even if it doesn't go right, it'll be okay for us. Putting the ball only where it's good for us and kind of okay for you. Really good awkward placement by Finn Smith. Definitely, if they want to have a young fly off on the Lions and not just the Finn Russell, Marcus Smith, and Owen Farrell, if they want to have a young gun, I think it's Finn, not Sam. I think it's Jack or Finn. Jack Crowley or Finn Smith, because they have that kind of toughness to them. Finn Smith carries the ball into contact fine. I mean, he carried the ball into contact where he knew he was going to get double tackled, triple tackled, and he did not have any hesitation. So it reminds me of a young Pollard in that sense, where you haven't been hurt yet, so you haven't got the scars. But he would put his team on the front foot. When he wanted to play on the line, Smith did, and pivoted back from there. But he also played from deep. And he seemed to sort of instinctively know when to keep the ball in contact and just reset. And he seemed to also know when to skip. And those skips were really good. He put his outside men into space almost immediately and let them cook, sometimes you don't even know exactly what's going to happen, but it's to get there quickly. And his cross kicks, I think, are really cool too. They're very disguised, a bit like how Mani does them, where, it's like a quick release. So you think he might be doing this, and then boom, it's to the cross kick. The Saints trusted their 10. I thought Alex Mitchell did something good too, which reminded me a bit of Faf, which is take the ball two hands as a 9 and do something before you go out, like make them guess, create a new platform, shift the entire defensive scheme of the overplaying, shooting, hair on fire Nienaber to where it's almost like I've created a new ruck over here. I'm immediately clean because, I'm close to the ruck, and then anyone can release it. And so the whole thing shifted, and it created these little seams. It created nice seams inside the defense where instead of having a 7-8 split on blind side to open side, there were times when there were only 4 people on a big blind side of, 15 meters, and you only have 4 defenders. That's what I kept seeing. Now, to be fair, Leinster did the same thing to the Saints on their tap and goes. They artificially created a short blind side that was kind of big with only 4 defenders by doing the fake tap, the shift, which brought over 4 forwards from the Saints to the right, and then suddenly the left side, the blind side, was from the poles to the touchline. There were only 4 defenders, and then Lowe can score untouched. So both teams were doing similar things, but Leinster was in deep water where they hadn't been. Saints had been in deep water all season. They had a horrible start. A lot of their players play for England, so they were without them. They didn't have the depth to navigate the Prem without their England stars. Then when the players came back finally, they were ragged. Finn Smith was walking on one leg, and they were able to play their way back in. A shout out for our guy Trocky, who was instrumental as well, along with big Aussie Josh Kemeny. We're talking a lot about these backs and how they shredded the Nienaber defense. Key to it was you have to first win the gain line enough. You have to get over the gain line, and Augustus and Kemeny were unbelievable at that, just smashing. And that allowed the Glory Boys, Pollock, to run around. But you first have to get over the line. And, the way Trocky carried, but also offloaded, good hands, seems to have a sense of the game. He just got about 4 kgs too much, I think, for Tony Brown and those guys to want. So anyone who knows a good diet, let's give it to Trocky, and he can become the mini Trocky. And but on everything else, on his measurables, love him. And I think that with 15 tests to play, Jasper out, Elrich still on the mend. Yeah, but you don't want to throw him right into carrying with that neck. If we've learned anything with Kitsoff, sometimes you need just a complete wind down. I think there's space for a guy like Trocky against some of the more, the lesser teams to give it a jolt and see what it looks like. My only concern probably is on the defense side. I know that first, foremost, second, third, and fourth, when you're going to box selection, it's all about, the defense battle stats. So, I don't know what his battle stats look like.
You're going to tell us what his battle stats are this coming Sunday, because we're going to be talking about the number 8 for the Springbok. You and Andre are going to have a nice little chat there. You've been doing a lot of homework, so I'm actually looking forward to that one. And Trocky's right in there in the running, and that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's true. Now, loose forwards, you always have this sort of interaction. So it's hard. Sometimes you look at a player and you go, why are you not doing more rucks? But it might be because on the loose trio, his coach has told him, I don't want you to be in as many rucks. I only want you to get involved here and there. And I think that's what's difficult when you're analyzing Evan Ruiz, Cameron Hanekom, is they play different games. And, you have your provincial coach telling you one thing, and then you have your Bok coach telling you another thing. And you don't always get the chance to do what the Bok coaches want you to do. So this season, Ruiz has really been hitting a lot of rucks. I don't know where that comes from exactly, but he seems very dedicated to the task and doing very well, by the way. He doesn't crock roll. He's not getting pinged for it either. He's just blasting people. It reminded me a little bit of watching in the other game, Bordeaux. There's a player named Pete Samu, who's a Wallaby, and he was never known as a ruck monkey in Super Rugby. He was killing people at the ruck. So that's a coach telling him to do something different. With Augustus, I would say probably it'll be repeat efforts, getting up off the floor. That will be the thing. That's what the coaches like about Ben Jason Dixon. You say what you will about Ben Jason, but he gets off the floor, and his idol is Peter Steph Toy, the number 1 get off the floor guy that you ever saw. And so, I think Trocky would have to make sure he can spring up and get ready.
Just lastly, and I mean, this has been a long podcast now, the Harry Index, for the first time in a long time, I'm not sure how long it was, a very long time, Leinster is no longer the number 1 team. But what's very interesting is Bordeaux's number 1, but the Saints are joint number 7 with the Bulls. So in theory, that final should be a bit of a lopsided affair. But now we've seen what they can do to the top team in the world. What happened with the Harry Index?
Really hard for the Saints to replicate that. Now, the blessing for them is there's a break, so they can, whatever voodoo medicine they did to get ready and peaked, they can do that again. They would probably still enter the final as a red hot underdog, and that will, I guess, that suits them. That's the MVS style, is be underdogs.
Under Saints, man.
Yeah, under Saints. Also, Bordeaux may have lost Damien Pinot. I don't know what that injury, it looked bad. So they're down a little bit. No, but I think, Bordeaux will be properly favorites. And you don't escape your season and your points differential and your problems just on one incredible match. So Harry Index would look at the Saints and say, just keep doing what you're doing, and then you would definitely rise. Some of the teams above them are going to fall for sure, right? So the Chiefs and the Crusaders are on a collision course. It's only going to be one of them. It's not going to be both. It's just that the index cannot split them right now. Even with some bad results here and there, it just looks like there's going to be one clear Kiwi team. And if there is a top Kiwi team, clearly top Kiwi team, that Kiwi team will tend to be in the top 5 because that's how good the All Blacks are. They're pulling from Super Rugby only. But there's also the questions of the French teams. You know, if Toulouse just sort of keeps diving, then I don't know what's going to save them. The gravity might keep taking them. Whereas for teams like the Saints and the Bulls, they have this opening. If the Saints go on to win the Champions Cup, you know, I don't know what we're going to do. It'd be a rare example of a team not doing very well in their league, but capturing the big prize. It's almost like the Rugby World Cup. If you don't win the Rugby Championship, you know, it's still the main thing.
That's interesting. Imagine the Bulls win the URC and the Saints win the Champions Cup. That's going to be a bit of a humdinger. That index is going to have sleepless nights there, I think.
We'll have to organize a playoff between the two of them. That's the only answer.
Can you imagine? Well, they've got a score to settle. You know, Jake doesn't take to losing at Loftus that easily, so he's got a score to settle there as well.
Yeah, hopefully when he said he circled the game in Glasgow, hopefully there was a much bigger circle around these other games coming up. I think all 3 top South African teams are actually very well poised, and no one can write the script. Nobody knows which Sharks team will take the field in the Shark Tank in playoffs. And anyone who's ever bet against the Stormers has a long time realized this is not a great thing to do. We will shock you. When we're supposed to play well, we'll play terribly. When we're supposed to lose, we'll shock you. So that's the way the world works. You'd still take Bulls as the inside track. They've got the pole position in the South African field if you're looking at Formula One terminology. But each one of those teams has some really questionable thing they've got to cross first. And the joy of rugby, of top sports, is how unpredictable it is. I mean, how many people really did have written down for sure Saints over Leinster in Dublin?
Nobody, let's be honest. I mean, they're all, you know, looking back and going, oh, I saw it. You didn't say it. Let's be honest. Anyway, it's taken up a lot of your time. Thank you. This is a Lekker one. I mean, it's a bit of a sea change, isn't it? Not just for the coaching staff, but also for rugby as a game. A completely different era almost.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.